What if I told you that some people's destinies were sealed in blood? Literally. Imagine being condemned to suffering, madness, and death before you even took your first breath. For generations, Europe's most powerful dynasties chose bloodline purity over human welfare, creating a horrifying cycle of genetic destruction. The consequences? Minds fractured by madness, bodies ravaged by deformity, and royal lineages that became biological nightmares. We're about to explore the tragic tales of women who paid the ultimate price for their ancestors' obsession with keeping power within the family. Trust me, by the time we reach number 1, you will be speechless. At number 10, we encounter Isabella II, Spain's tragic queen who reigned from 1833 to 1868. Her story begins with what seemed like a blessing, but quickly transformed into a curse. Born in Madrid in 1830, little Isabella appeared to be the answer to her father's prayers for an heir. Yet beneath the royal celebrations lurked a dark secret. This innocent child was the product of an uncle marrying his own niece. The genetic web grows even more sinister. Her maternal grandparents were simultaneously her paternal great-grandparents, creating a bloodline so twisted it defied nature itself. When Isabella reached 16, the royal machine forced her into marriage with her double-second cousin, continuing the deadly tradition. Though she gave birth to 11 children, a devastating 7 died before reaching adulthood. Whispers in the palace suggested an even more shocking truth. Her husband may not have fathered any of the surviving offspring. The strain of this genetic burden ultimately destroyed her reign, forcing her into exile in 1868, leaving behind a monarchy forever tainted by the consequences of inbreeding. Coming in at number 9, we discover Louise of Austria, a woman whose very existence challenged the laws of genetics. Born in 1791 into the Habsburg machine of power, her life story reads like a cautionary tale written in DNA. This wasn't just another royal marriage gone wrong. This was biological warfare disguised as dynasty building. Louise entered the world as the daughter of double first cousins, meaning her family tree looked more like a twisted vine than any natural structure. The genetic lottery had been rigged against her from conception. Out of 12 children born to her parents, only 7 managed to survive past childhood, a devastating mortality rate that whispered of deeper problems lurking in their bloodline. Louise carried genetic material so concentrated that modern scientists classify it alongside populations that have been isolated for centuries. When she turned 18, the political machinery of Europe decided her fate: marriage to Napoleon Bonaparte, the very man who had been her father's greatest adversary. This union wasn't about love or even compatibility. It was about creating an heir who could bridge 2 warring empires. Louise became a vessel for peace negotiations, her body the battleground where Austrian genetics met French ambition. The pressure to produce a healthy successor fell entirely on her genetically compromised shoulders, making her both a queen and a victim of her ancestors' obsession with bloodline purity. At number 8, we leap from European palaces to the harsh reality of modern America, proving that the horrors of extreme inbreeding didn't end with ancient royalty. Deep in the isolated mountains of West Virginia lives a family that became the subject of one of the most shocking documentaries in recent memory. This isn't medieval history. This is happening right now in 21st century America. Meet Whitaker, a woman whose life story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Genetic nightmares still exist in our modern world. Featured in a disturbing documentary that sent shockwaves through viewers worldwide, the Whitaker family represents what happens when generations of isolation and intermarriage continue unchecked. Lorraine stands as a haunting reminder that royal bloodlines weren't the only ones to suffer from this practice. Living in conditions that defy modern understanding, She exists as both a victim and a symbol of humanity's darkest genetic experiments. Her son Timmy has been documented as potentially the most genetically compromised individual alive today, carrying DNA so concentrated it challenges medical science. This isn't a tale from dusty history books. It's a contemporary tragedy unfolding in backwoods America. The Whitaker story proves that when communities become completely cut off from the outside world, the same devastating patterns emerge. Geography and poverty created the same isolation that royal protocols once enforced, with equally catastrophic results. Lorraine's existence serves as a bridge between ancient royal tragedies and modern human suffering, showing us that genetic consequences know no boundaries of time or social class. At number 7, we travel to 18th century Portugal to witness one of history's most tragic descents into madness. Maria I, known as the Pious, though some might argue the tormented fits better, ruled Portugal from 1777 until her mental collapse. Born in 1734, Maria's story is a chilling reminder that even divine right couldn't protect against genetic devastation. Her parents, King Joseph I and Maria Anna of Spain, represented the 16th Iberian royal couple joined through close blood relations, creating a genetic house of cards that was destined to fall. But Maria's fate was sealed when she made a decision that would haunt her bloodline forever. She married her own uncle. This wasn't love. This was dynastic duty taken to its most extreme conclusion. The consequences were swift and brutal. Half of her children failed to survive, their tiny bodies unable to withstand the genetic burden placed upon them. As the years passed, Maria's mind began to fracture under the weight of loss and the invisible poison flowing through her veins. Palace servants whispered of midnight screams echoing through the corridors as the queen's sanity slowly dissolved. Eventually, her mental state deteriorated so completely that she was declared unfit to rule, spending her final years lost in a world of paranoia and religious delusions. Maria's story stands as a testament to how royal bloodlines could destroy not just bodies, but minds, leaving behind broken rulers who paid the ultimate price for their ancestors' obsession with genetic purity. Number 6 brings us face to face with a Gothic nightmare wrapped in silk and jewels. Marie Louise. Elizabeth d'Orléans lived a life that reads like a horror novel written in blood and tears. Born in 1695 into French royalty's most twisted arrangements, her very existence was a testament to dynastic obsession gone horribly wrong. Her father had been coerced into marrying an illegitimate daughter of King Louis XIV, creating a union built on shame and political necessity rather than love. As the eldest surviving child of this forced marriage, Marie Louise never stood a chance at happiness. The royal machine ground forward, arranging her marriage to yet another cousin, Prince Charles of Berry, perpetuating the cycle of genetic destruction that plagued European nobility. What followed was a heartbreaking series of tragedies that would break any mother's spirit. She gave birth to 3 children, but none survived childhood, their fragile bodies unable to endure the genetic burden inherited from generations of inbreeding. Whether it was the crushing weight of loss or simply the toxic inheritance flowing through her veins, Marie Louise turned to alcohol at the shocking age of 14. Imagine a child barely into adolescence drowning her sorrows in wine, desperately trying to numb the pain of a life she never chose. Reports from the palace describe a young woman whose laughter had been replaced by the clink of glass, whose royal duties became secondary to her desperate need to escape reality. She died at 24, her body ravaged by grief and alcohol, leaving behind a legacy that stands as one of history's most tragic examples of dynastic sacrifice. At number 5, we encounter a modern royal whose story bridges ancient traditions with contemporary reality. Princess Alexia of Greece, born in 1965, represents one of the final chapters in European royalty's long history of genetic entanglement. Her tale might seem like a fairy tale romance on the surface, but beneath the glittering headlines lay a darker truth about bloodline obsession that persisted well into the modern era. Alexia emerged from what appeared to be a loving union between Queen Anne-Marie of Denmark and King Constantine II of Greece, a marriage that captivated the world's attention. Yet behind the romantic facade lurked a disturbing reality. Her parents weren't just royally matched. They were genetically connected in ways that would make scientists cringe. Constantine and Anne-Marie shared blood relations not once, but twice over, creating a double genetic bond that was as politically strategic as it was biologically risky. Their family trees weren't separate entities joining together. They were tangled webs that had been intertwining for generations. Constantine's ancestry read like a masterclass in royal inbreeding, with great-grandparents who were siblings and grandmothers who doubled as great-aunts. Anne-Marie brought her own complicated Danish lineage to the mix, ensuring that their children, including Alexia, carried the genetic legacy of centuries-old European intermarriage. This wasn't ancient history. This was happening in the 1960s, proving that even as the world modernized around them, some royal traditions remained stubbornly entrenched in the past. Alexia's story demonstrates how genetic consequences can persist across generations, hidden beneath modern sophistication and contemporary glamour. Number 4 introduces us to a woman whose genetic legacy surpasses even the most notorious cases in European history. Maria Antonia of Austria, a Habsburg princess born in 1669, possessed a level of inbreeding that would make even her infamous relative Charles II of Spain seem genetically diverse by comparison. While Charles is typically cited as the ultimate victim of Habsburg genetic manipulation, Maria Antonia's bloodline tells an even more shocking story. Her family tree wasn't just tangled. It was a biological impossibility that defied nature's most basic rules. Instead of branching outward like a normal lineage, her ancestry formed what geneticists can only describe as a closed loop, a circle of blood relations so tight that calling it a family tree becomes almost laughable. Maria Antonia's genetic makeup resembled that of a child born to full siblings, yet her parents were supposedly more distantly related. The mathematics of her heritage reveal the true horror of Habsburg breeding practices. Generations of strategic marriages had compressed her genetic diversity to levels that modern science considers incompatible with healthy human development. She lived only 23 years, her body unable to sustain the biological contradictions written into her DNA. Despite being genetically more compromised than the famous Charles II, Maria Antonia's story has been largely forgotten by history, overshadowed by her male relatives' more documented struggles. Her existence represents the absolute peak of European royal inbreeding, a human being created through centuries of genetic manipulation that pushed the boundaries of what the human body could endure. In the annals of Habsburg tragedy, she stands as the ultimate example of bloodline obsession taken to its most extreme and devastating conclusion. At number 3, we journey back over 3,000 years to ancient Egypt, where 2 tiny mummified remains tell one of history's most heartbreaking tales of genetic destruction. Deep within Tutankhamun's tomb, archaeologists discovered what they initially labeled as mummies 317A and 317B, 2 infant girls whose preserved bodies hold secrets that would shock the modern world. These weren't just any Egyptian children. They were the daughters of the boy king himself, born from a union that epitomized the pharaonic obsession with divine bloodline purity. Tutankhamun, who ruled Egypt around 1300 BCE, had married his own half-sister Tutankhamun, continuing a tradition that Egyptian royalty believed would preserve their godlike status. But the gods, it seems, had different plans. Both daughters were either stillborn or died within days of birth, their tiny bodies bearing the devastating marks of genetic complications that even ancient Egyptian medicine couldn't overcome. The royal couple's desperate attempts to produce an heir resulted only in tragedy, as their shared bloodline carried the invisible poison of too close genetic relations. These two unnamed princesses represent the ultimate cost of pharaonic pride. Innocent lives sacrificed on the altar of divine kingship. When Tutankhamun himself died young and childless, his dynasty died with him, leaving behind only golden treasures and these two small reminders that even gods must obey the laws of biology. Their story bridges millennia, proving that the consequences of genetic obsession transcend time, culture, and the supposed protection of divine favor. Number 2 catapults us into the modern era with a story so disturbing it reads like fiction, yet every horrifying detail is real. In the remote Australian outback, authorities uncovered what would become one of the most shocking cases of contemporary inbreeding ever documented. The Cult family, living under a pseudonym to protect their identity, had spent generations in complete isolation, creating a closed genetic loop that defied modern understanding. At the center of this nightmare stands Kimberly Cult, a woman whose very existence challenges everything we thought we knew about human genetic limits in the 21st century. Born sometime in the 1980s, Kimberly represents the devastating culmination of decades of unchecked intermarriage within a single family unit. This wasn't ancient royal protocol. This was modern neglect and isolation, creating the same catastrophic results that destroyed European dynasties centuries earlier. When social services finally discovered the family in the early 2000s, investigators found a community so genetically compromised that it seemed impossible they could survive. Multiple generations had been marrying within their own bloodline, creating genetic concentrations that rivaled the worst cases in recorded history. Kimberly's condition was so severe that medical professionals struggled to comprehend how such extreme inbreeding could occur in contemporary Australia. The discovery led to extensive police investigations and arrests, as authorities grappled with a situation that seemed ripped from a horror novel rather than modern reality. Her story serves as a chilling reminder that the genetic nightmares of history can still manifest in today's world, hidden in forgotten corners where oversight fails and isolation reigns supreme. At number 1 stands the most iconic woman in history, whose beauty and intelligence masked a genetic reality so extreme it defies imagination. Cleopatra VII Philopator, the legendary Queen of Egypt, who captivated Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, represents the ultimate fusion of political genius and biological catastrophe. Forget everything Hollywood taught you about this remarkable woman. The real story is far more complex and infinitely more disturbing. Born in 69 BCE into the Ptolemaic dynasty, Cleopatra wasn't Egyptian at all. She was pure Greek Macedonian, the product of 3 centuries of the most systematic inbreeding program ever devised by human civilization. The Ptolemies didn't just practice occasional cousin marriage, they turned brother-sister unions into a sacred obsession, believing that diluting their bloodline with outsiders would diminish their divine right to rule. Cleopatra's parents were siblings, her grandparents were siblings, and this pattern repeated endlessly through generation after generation of deliberate genetic concentration. Her very name was borrowed from a rare Syrian princess, one of the few hints that any outside blood had ever been permitted into this closed genetic system. When Cleopatra took power, she inherited not just an empire, but a bloodline so compressed that modern geneticists struggle to map its complexity. She was a living monument to the Ptolemaic strategy of absolute bloodline preservation. Brilliant, powerful, and ultimately doomed by the very genetics that her dynasty believed made them superior. Her tragic end alongside Mark Antony marked not just the fall of Egypt, but the conclusion of history's most extreme experiment in royal inbreeding.